Here we are, 20 years ago today, since 7/7, 52 killed. There's going to be a minute's silence a bit later on this morning on London's Transport Network. Special service at St Paul's Cathedral mid-morning. That's for remembrance. The difference today, the terror laws chief has been saying, and senior police officers have been saying, are these. Smartphones. They're saying that radicalisation of kids is now happening in the bedroom and not in these fake youth clubs, which were largely blamed for the radicalisation of the people who committed the crimes 20 years ago today. And that is the issue, isn't it? It's spread like an octopus's tentacles into private homes.
Yeah, well, we saw that with Shamima Begum, one of the three schoolgirls in East London who went out to join ISIS. It is all online now, and so that means more people can be radicalised that way. But the other way I'd worry about phones is you look what happened after the Southport murders of the three schoolgirls, the lies that went around on the internet, and it triggered the riots. If you go back 20 years, and I remember it on the morning, I was at the Daily Mirror then. We started late. We started later, finished later. I was getting ready to go to work, and it comes. The Tube network is down. That's how it was initially reported, and then you discovered something
failure to do with the grid.
Yeah,
yes,
electricity supplies. Yeah, and then you find out. It's absolutely horrific. 4 bombs have gone off, 3 on the tubes, 1 on the bus.
Not just 4 bombs, 4 suicide bombers.
Yeah.
It was a coordinated Islamist terror attack.
But the response of people, actually, was very different to Southport. Of course, there was huge alarm, and there's lots of efforts by Ken Livingstone, the Mayor of London. I remember the TUC were involved, of getting everybody calm. Don't let us go to war with each other. Yeah. These suicide bombers have inflicted mayhem, taking lives, but don't turn on other people, other Muslims in communities.
Yeah. Although
I worry if it happened now.
There was a lot of suspicion.
There was
in the wake, and I mean, I know anyone getting on a tube, seeing someone with a backpack,
absolutely right,
became very nervous.
I'll be blunt. I would go into a different carriage, or not get on the train.
And I'm sure a lot of people in the Muslim community felt like there was a lot of and fear.
Well, there was, and there were incidents, but it wasn't on the backlash or there wasn't rioting on the scale after Southport.
But do you know what strikes me?
And 2 weeks later, of course, there was the second wave, but thankfully the bombs didn't detonate.
And then Jean Charles de Menezes, of course, was falsely targeted by police, suspected, and then killed. And, thoughts to everybody involved, because it was a terrifying period of time. What strikes me is how effective police have been since then. Now, we had that awful year in 2017, Manchester Arena attack and a number of different terror attacks. But in the intervening years, I mean, considering mobile phones, the way that people can be radicalised online, it's actually a tribute to the secret services that they do deal with these.
We don't know how many but a lot.
What function do you think a remembrance like today serves us as a society, as a community? Because we trundle on, we live with the day-to-day reality of threats to our security. It's part of our lifestyle now, whether we're queuing at an airport to go through security controls in a way that we never had 25 years ago, but we take for granted now. What function does a remembrance like today perform for us, do you think, as a society?
The King hopes that it's going to be a moment of unity.
Yeah.
But do you... I mean, is that paying lip service to something which no longer exists? How divided are we as a society?
I think we're much more divided than we were 20 years ago.
I mean, look at, what's been happening over the last few weeks, months. We have huge divisions currently over Gaza,
demonstrations
Palestine,
just about
Israel.
every Saturday in central London, in major town cities, every week, week in, week out.
Some protesters feeling like they're proscribed as terrorists for protesting.
Many Jewish people would say they don't feel safe enough now to go into central London, for instance. That's probably happening in other cities too because of these demonstrations, and I think that's deeply regrettable.
I can tell you as a matter of fact, I live in Golders Green in north-west London. Many of my friends and neighbours are Jewish. I can tell you as a matter of fact, they feel a lot less secure now. A lot less. And they're not just saying that, that's how they feel emotionally.
No,
they feel genuinely under
Jewish friends say the same say to me, and then many British Muslims feel under siege too. You have political parties that actually demonise them. What will it perform? Very little, in truth, this service, it's got to be said. the king isn't going, is he?
Well, the families will be presumably represented, so it's very important for them.
Very important for them,
I do think it's odd that the king isn't going to lead the commemoration. It's going to be the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Edward and Sophie, who are not. It's not even the Prince and Princess of Wales. I mean, I know we have diary commitments, but I do think it's curious that the king isn't leading it, actually.
And, you know, these 2-minute silences are observed in the breach. Very few people follow them up.
A lot of people don't even know it's happening.
No. I mean, I think, you know, but I remember it, and I remember the bus driver who survived. You know, he lost a lot of his passengers, and he walked home all the way to South London. He was completely bewildered and thrown by what had happened. Yeah. Because just horrific carnage. Because of course there are the dead.
Tavistock Square.
Yeah, right outside the British Medical Association.
And there was a conference
going on, so doctors spilled out of that building
to help save lives.
And they did. And a colleague of mine at the Mail, who's in one of the back offices, lost his leg on that bus, just going to work. Gosh. That was what it was. People were going to work, an ordinary day, and then terror visits you.
People are terribly maimed, physically and mentally.
Over 700 people badly.
Just as an aside,
and get the mental trauma.
To what you just said about the doctors rushing out to help, and members of the public too, gathering around to help. Not for discussion here, but later on the programme, we're going to be talking about this extraordinary tendency now for when something dreadful happens, like a car crash or a bus hitting somebody or somebody coming off their motorbike on a high street, instead of running to help, increasingly people, and we're getting this from senior police officers, people are taking out their mobile phones and filming it.
Oh, God.
They're not going across to do CPR or to ask what they can do or even to dial 999. They're simply recording it, uploading it and putting it out on social media. And increasingly, people are beginning to get information about maybe the death of a loved one or the serious injury to a loved one from social media rather than a knock on the door from the police.
I know, well,
the worst sort of voyeurism, isn't it?
It's shocking.
It's look at me, isn't it? Look at me, here I am. But of course, we in newspapers, TV, the same, all sorts of rules now and how, you know, waiting for somebody to be identified before you name him on TV or her in a newspaper, because you want to make sure the families are informed properly before you.
Well, I know, and I'll tell you,
the news.
I can imagine that there will be people saying, "Well, that's rich coming from, you know, newspapers and media organisations." I mean, people remember after the crash which killed Princess Diana. Of course, there were photographers on the backs of bikes who then took photographs.
Well, one, a lot has changed since then. Two, that was in France. And 3, I don't think any of those pictures were used in the mainstream media.
They weren't. They weren't.
Of terrible scenes in the car.
Neither will be the pictures filmed by people, you know, who see crashes. But they might say, you know, we're just doing... It's a televised society. It's a photographed society. And I wonder whether the fact that... Because when we were doing the research for this story, I thought, well, perhaps there's a merit sometimes because police might need to investigate the scene of a crime, and after they attend, they might find it useful. You will often hear police say, if anyone has any video of this, could you please submit it, because it would be useful in the investigation. And also, I wondered, do people really film before they call 999? Now, the police say, yes, that is the case, that they're filming instead of calling 999. But I wonder also if it's a sign that people don't believe that the police will come anymore. That sometimes they think, or maybe they think someone else is going to do that. Someone else is going to call 999.
I'm sorry, I think it's voyeurism. Some of the examples we're going to be giving, we're going to be talking to the daughter of a man. She was on a bus, and the bus had to stop because there'd just been an accident in front, and it turned out to be a father who'd been knocked off his bike. He was very, very badly hurt. He nearly died. And she wasn't quite sure if it was him. She thought it probably was, but she couldn't get to the scene because he was surrounded by people just filming him in his agonies. Now, they weren't doing that for police evidence. They were doing that out of sheer, almost sadistic voyeurism.
I'm a journalist, but if I saw a scene like that, I hope instead of taking the top off my pen or getting my camera phone, I would like to think I would go to somebody's aid.
Totally right.
I'd call an ambulance first and then try and help.
Of course you would.
Yeah, of course you'd try and help. The issue is, would you at any stage film it?
No.
I can't imagine doing that. No,
I can't.
No,
and we deal
it's
in
not
facts,
our
and
instinct.
No, it's not.
But I just wonder the reasons why. You're saying it's just voyeurism. I just wonder why someone would film instead of calling 999.
I think it's obviously more complex than just voyeurism. I do happen to believe that it's generational. I think a lot of the people, apparently, who are doing this are quite young. And I think that they are a generation who've grown up behind their mobile phones. It's almost like a screen from reality. Yeah. It protects them and filters them from reality. So looking at what would actually horrify you if you didn't have your phone with you, if you look at it through your phone, it diminishes it.
It's also the fact you get clicks.
And you get clicks and likes.
There was that shocking case not so long ago of 2 police officers convicted of sharing images
of Northwest London,
of a death scene.
The 2 sisters.
The 2 sisters. It wasn't traumatic enough for the family of those sisters to find 2 coppers sharing the images because they were getting a kick out of it and it was cool.
Yeah, that was... Yeah, disgusting. They were prosecuted and convicted. OK, let's move on to an issue that... I wonder whether, for people who aren't involved in special needs education, has sort of risen up as a bit of a surprise, but will come as zero surprise at all to anyone whose child requires one of these education, health and care plans, EHCPs. There is a letter to The Guardian signed by dozens of special needs and disability charities and campaigners that say that parents are absolutely petrified that there are plans afoot which are going to restrict or abolish altogether EHCPs, on which 600,000 children and young people rely for individual support. Now, I suppose, is this an equivalent, Kevin, to the PIP issue, that the government thinks there are too many people requiring special support, that perhaps the definitions have got too broad, and that this is a huge burden on local councils to provide this kind of support. And they think, I mean, I know that Bridget Phillipson was asked about this. I was on the Laura Kunsberg programme watching the interview yesterday. She was asked about this specifically by Laura Kunsberg. Are you going to get rid of these EHCPs? So they cost £12 billion a year to the taxpayer, but they do provide a legally enforceable right to ensure that children receive bespoke support.
She refused to say 3 times whether she's going to get rid of them.
Yes, as soon as they say, let me be absolutely clear,
you know, it's going to be
straight away that you're not going to get clarity.
And this feels in my bones, like, here we go again.
What, with the backbenchers saying, no.
Yeah, and they are now emboldened. They've seen off the winter fuel rise. That's been abandoned. The entire welfare bill has been defenestrated and dismantled by Labour backbenchers in revolt.
And the winter fuel allowance, of course, they had to do a U-turn for that because backbenchers and, in fact, I'm sure senior members of the party said this is
And they're going to come after the government on this too, because clearly she's going to get rid of them. And she's saying
she might replace them, but if
something else.
If you replace them, you want it to be replaced with a better system. She used better, but you want to ensure it is better. Now, you can't just turn up at school and say to a teacher, I want one of these plans and assistance. You've really got to fight for it. And many parents will say they have to fight tooth and nail over a prolonged period of time to get their child the support they require and deserve. And then there are other parents don't get it. And the system, there's a lot of money, 12 billion, unquestionably. How cruel would it be if you left kids with special needs and disabilities and they don't get the support?
You could say the same on the PIP's argument. How cruel would it be if you were denying people who...
And with kids, though, we'd all pay in the long run because they're not going to grow into adults who can contribute and have as fulfilled and lives as they would if they get the support when they're young. She'll know she's got to tread very carefully here, and quite rightly. But it's not to say the current system isn't perfect and can't be improved. But if you are going to improve it, is it driven by saving money?
Yes.
Or is it driven by a genuine desire to actually improve the system?
And what can you get past your backbenchers? And I want to ask you this. One of the reasons you guys come on this show is because your ears are to the ground. Yeah. What are you picking up now in the last few days from the rebel Labour backbenchers? Are they actually basically saying to each other, blimey, what have we done? Or are they saying to each other, well, what can we do next?
I think the latter. I think they feel emboldened because it was the same with winter fuel. You couldn't find, really, in private, a Labour MP to support it. They thought it was an idiotic, wicked policy which hit far too many people who couldn't afford to lose money. Same with this disability cut. If they were going to try and change the benefits bill, they should have gone for a benefit where you could argue people are languishing at home instead of working because they're getting... The benefit system makes it more attractive for them to be at home on benefits rather than going to work. Not going for people's disability benefits, which often help people in work.
Well, one of the justifications that the government gave was that too many young people claim a benefit, and then that makes it less likely they will ever be able to work. So they wanted to, their argument was help those young people, not to think that they've got a problem, but to help them to work, because actually it can be a life sentence.
But it just looked like they were trying to save money in the wrong place.
Well,
and this feels like they're doing it again.
They didn't. Because the government doesn't have a narrative about what it is trying to achieve. Is it trying to be a sort of a social justice Labour government that looks at where the welfare state is not working for people and therefore has to persuade its backbenchers to support sympathetic cuts which are going to help people to work? Or is it just looking desperately for money to save left, right and centre?
I'm afraid it feels like they're laughing.
And the departments go, hang on, why are you targeting us?
The Chancellor tied herself in knots with the manifesto about tax rises, and they've tied themselves in...
No tax rises for working people.
And then she repeated that again in November when she was for the CBI, and yet this weekend she's no longer saying...
The narrative was saving money for the taxpayer by taking money from people who are gaming the system, and they thought it would appeal to the Daily Mail and the Telegraph. That's what they did. That was the narrative, and they thought you would back it.
In fact, the wrong people.
You call for deeper cuts in welfare.
In the right place.
And if you're changing the system now, and Labour MPs are kicking up a fuss, I think we'll end up with a better government. I think.
Well, a government that's squeezed on one side by reform and on the other side by its own backbenchers. It's a nightmare.
No, but it's not being squeezed.
It's like tackling a course between a whirlpool and the rocks.
If you're more likely to get a authentic Labour government, I think we're in a better place as a country.
No, Kevin, it's limping from one crisis to another.
No, it's because the Prime Minister and too many...
Don't believe in anything.
Too many of his cabinet colleagues in Downing Street became remote, and they weren't seeing the world the way lots of Labour MPs and people who voted Labour were seeing it.
That's a criticism you normally make of a government that's been in power for 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
Not a government that's not even been in power for 1 year.
The trouble
Remote, he just doesn't believe in anything, the Prime Minister.
He does.
The issue is, didn't we have a Conservative government that put up tax to the highest, record high rates, and also spent huge amounts of public money? I mean, it acted like a Labour government, didn't it, the previous Tory government? And so now the Labour government's come in sort of trying to be a bit more Tory on tax and cut public services. And the Labour backbenchers go, hang on a moment, this isn't what we do Labour government for.
But the reasons the Conservative government ended up spending a lot of money, one was Brexit, was an economic disaster.
And the pandemic.
And also Truss and Putin. Blame them for Truss, but not for Putin's invasion. So they spent a lot of money, but with very little purpose. Yeah,
but the thing is that this Labour government, is it going to cut the money? Because that's what the Chancellor wants to do. She wants to cut all of this public spending, doesn't she? And what she sees as a bloated welfare state. And she wants to generate growth. Yeah. But it is not what the Labour backbenchers want. And now we hear that there is likely to be a wealth tax. Now, of course, I can imagine Labour backbenchers would be cheering this.
It's not likely to be one. There are people calling for it, but Neil, look, I agree. I think there should be a wealth tax.
Because you like to bash the rich, don't you, Kevin? Filthy rich. That's right.
No, I want a fairer, better Britain, Susanna, which is rather different than just wanting to bash the rich.
But you would like a wealth tax.
I don't like the fact we live in a country where some people are dirt poor and others are filthy rich. And I would like us to be a fairer, better country. That's what I want. Not bash the rich.
But you don't think it's like likely. You only think it's being floated.
It would be odd if they brought in a wealth tax when we know she's already, as we speak, unpicking her own non-DOMS tax because so many people are leaving Britain.
All right, 5 minutes left. Something we'll be discussing a bit later, having hopefully a lively debate about. It's this. Woman A commits a serious crime and is sent to jail by a judge for, say, 6 months. Woman B, the next woman in front of him in the same court, same judge, has committed an identical crime, but she's 4 months pregnant. Therefore, she doesn't go to jail. That, effectively, is the proposal being put forward today in the Commons, that pregnant women, purely because they're pregnant, should never be sent to jail. What do we think?
Actually, the guidelines for magistrates, I only know magistrates, but I suspect it's the same for High Court judges, is bend over backwards not to imprison women, particularly those with children. They're already there. It would depend on the crime.
Yeah.
Now, if you've murdered somebody or whatever, or chopped somebody's arm off with a knife, then I think you're going to prison. But do we really want kids being born in prison? No.
I think it's got to be common sense with the judge.
Well, there's a criminal lawyer coming on the programme who says that women will, if this was introduced as carte blanche, that, if you are pregnant, you are completely excluded from a prison sentence, that women will simply get pregnant in order to avoid prison.
That would be the downside. Law of unintended consequences.
Yeah, you don't have to be Einstein to work out what will happen.
There we go. Yeah, so that would suggest... Now, what about this story that a senior police officer is urging police to crack down on cannabis, and the country's longest-serving chief constable says even smelling the drug feels like a sign of crime and disorder and makes him feel unsafe. Now, I would say on the streets of London, it's quite unusual to walk down a street and not smell the smell of cannabis.
I think that's right.
I don't know whether that's just around South London.
No, we've got quite a lot in North London, I tell you, and it's not me. And it's not me.
I'd like to say it's not me either.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely not, Richard. No.
That's 20 other unpleasant smells, but not cannabis. Sorry.
So Andy Marsh, who leads the College of Policing, says frontline officers should do something about it. I mean, honestly, as if frontline officers are not dealing with 100 million things at all time. Would it be worth anyone's time saying don't smoke that?
It'd be like herding cats.
Oh, I totally
The genie's
agree.
out the bottle.
Yeah.
It really is.
Do you think what he's really arguing is against decriminalisation?
I think he is.
Which is, he's getting his
The Mayor of London,
retaliation
Sadiq Khan, said if people are caught with it in small quantities, don't criminalise it.
Well, that's right around the country.
Yeah.
And it's because you don't want to waste police time. Now, look, it's an illegal drug. There's a whole debate on whether drugs should be treated as health education rather than a criminal issue. But I don't think people who take cannabis, yes, you're breaking the law by buying it, but never and using it. But are they really master criminals?
Well, actually, we say that...
Isn't it kind of
behaviour? It's more about the way it can affect people's psychology.
Well, we saw the
Marcus
conviction.
Monzo, the samurai sword.
A
little boy killed on his way to school.
Cannabis.
Shocking.
But that's unusual.
And it does cause... there's evidence it does cause a lot of psychosis.
Yeah, there are, but I think somebody smoking it, or you go past and you smell it, I mean, do you really want to get the flying squad out?
Yes. I feel for the police right now because I think they're having to deal with an enormous amount. Of course, yesterday, the head of the Metropolitan Police said we should shake up the police service altogether. There's too many police forces and they should all be, better coordinated.
Yeah, I think there's 43.
Yes.
And there's a lot of repetition, a lot of back office stuff. Do you really need 43 chief constables?
It's from a time when coppers used to go out on bikes. Pedal around, which is quite nice in some areas, but I think criminals use county lines to evade forces. I think we've just got to move with the times.
Right.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah.
We are getting people contacting us about EHCPs. Here's an email. EHCP is already so hard to obtain, essential to getting a specialist school place. At my son's school, there are 60 children applying for one place. The process is well over the legal time frame. EHCP reviews are many years behind schedule. It is a huge fight, and it's terrifying they may be made harder to get or taken away. You can see why the Education Secretary thinks it needs to be reformed.
Yeah.
She's going to have a hell of a fight in hand.
But it is difficult, because do you want to take something away from a kid that they get now, or say...
And some of these children, some of these private schools that have closed down, there were children there with special needs in those private schools. And where are they going now?
You've never said anything about the 400 state schools
I've just said some of these private schools that have closed because of the VAT hike.
Minority.
Thousands of kids, many of them with special needs, have been dumped out of the school system.
Well, gentlemen, retire to your respective boudoirs, watch the programme closely, and we'll see you again at about 20
I'll make sure he doesn't take any drugs.
Yeah, please. Just caffeine.
Yeah.
Just a large glass of lemonade.